Thumbelina. Once upon a time, a good-hearted but extremely poor peasant gave her last loaf of bread to a beggar. "I have only this corn seed to give you in return," said the grateful beggar. "Plant it, and you will see what it will become." The peasant woman planted the seed in a pot. The very next morning, she discovered a big, beautiful flower. Inside the petals stood a tiny young lady, no bigger than the peasant's thumb. The woman was overjoyed. "I shall call you Thumbelina," she said. "You will need things just your size," said the peasant woman to Thumbelina. She looked around her cottage. "I will make you a bed from this walnut shell." "I also like to paint, tell stories, and dance," said Thumbelina. "Then I will make you a tiny easel and your very own stage," the peasant woman promised. The peasant woman and Thumbelina spent many happy days together. Late one night, an ugly old frog hopped into the cottage. She saw Thumbelina asleep in the walnut shell. "Why, this pretty creature will make a perfect wife for my son," thought the frog. She picked up the sleeping Thumbelina, carried her to the river, and placed her on a lily pad. When Thumbelina awoke, the first thing she saw was the old frog and her son staring straight at her. They were such an awful sight, she began to cry. "It's no use crying," said the old frog. "I have brought you here to marry my son." The son grinned and bobbed his head up and down. Thumbelina cried harder and louder than before. The fish in the river heard Thumbelina. They gathered beneath her lily pad and waited for the frogs to leave. Then they poked their heads out of the water. "Look, how lovely she is!" exclaimed the fish. "It is our duty to help her." Together, the fish nibbled right through the stem of the lily pad. Soon, Thumbelina was joyfully floating down the river, away from the frogs. As she drifted along, Thumbelina met a beautiful butterfly. The two became friends and went sailing down the river, greeting the birds in the bushes, the squirrels in the trees, and the honeybees on the wildflowers. Suddenly, a beetle snatched up the tiny Thumbelina and carried her to a tree. "Isn't she beautiful?" he asked his beetle friends, but they thought she looked too much like a human. The beetle sighed and agreed. He dropped Thumbelina on a daisy in the woods below. Thumbelina got right to work making a happy home in the woods. She wove herself a soft bed of grass. She drank dew from the bluebells in the morning. When evening came, she drank honey from the prime roses and sang sweet songs with the birds. After a time, the days grew cold. "Goodbye, Thumbelina," said the birds. We must fly to warmer places for the winter. The first tiny snowflakes felt like snowdrifts to delicate little Thumbelina. She trudged through the storm, looking for shelter. At last, Thumbelina saw a tiny cottage and knocked on the door. A cheerful field mouse invited her inside. "You may stay here all winter, my dear child," said the field mouse. "But you must keep my house neat and tidy and tell me stories every day." Thumbelina gladly agreed. One evening, a wealthy mole came to visit. "After you finish cleaning up, do tell the mole one of your charming stories, Thumbelina," said the field mouse. Thumbelina told the mole a story about her adventure on the river. Then she sang and danced for him. The mole could not help falling in love with Thumbelina. He was a shy mole, though, so he kept his love for her a secret. The next evening, Thumbelina and the field mouse had tea at the mole's house. Thumbelina told more of her stories until it was time to go. "I will return you to your cottage by way of a shortcut," said the mole. "However, we will be passing a bird that has recently died. Please do not be alarmed at the sight of him." They set out, and before long they passed the bird lying in the tunnel. "You see, it is only a foolish swallow," said the mole. "It probably sang all summer and then starved to death during the winter." Thumbelina saw the bird and was reminded of the friends she sang with in the woods. She leaned over to stroke the poor creature and was amazed to hear its heart still beating. "Hurry along," said the mole. Each night, Thumbelina crept back to the swallow. She gave him a coverlet of chrysanthemum leaves and helped him to sip water from a flower leaf. "Some day I will repay you, my dear friend," he said. Spring came, and the mole could no longer keep his secret. "The mole was asking for your hand in marriage," said the field mouse, "and I told him you would be pleased to be his wife. Tomorrow shall be your wedding day, Thumbelina." Thumbelina was so saddened by the news, she could not speak. As soon as Thumbelina and the swallow dug their way out of the passageway, Thumbelina climbed onto the swallow's back, and away they flew. When they came to an enchanted part of the woods, Thumbelina clapped her hands and exclaimed, "Look, dear swallow, below us are people who are just my size." The swallow swooped down next to a handsome young man with shiny wings and a golden crown on his head. "You must be the prince," said the swallow. Thumbelina stepped onto the flower near the prince and curtsied. The moment the prince saw Thumbelina, he knew He wanted her to be his wife. He showed her his kingdom in the forest and then asked her to be his bride. Thumbelina accepted, and on their wedding day, she was presented with her own pair of wings, so she could fly alongside her prince forever. The end. Thank you for listening, boys and girls. This is from your Story Fairies. Have a good night. Sweet dreams.